Like, imagine this. This year, we're walking through the streets of New York City, a place known for the world's most iconic cities. The suits of punch from the globe left already in delusion. The destruct and despair and damage destruction from the world's most. Now picture this moment, being watched by millions, including those who never thought they'd see such a thing in a place like this. Among them is a man whose reactions have always sparked controversy, a man who once held one of the most powerful positions in the world, and tonight, even he cannot ignore what is unfolding before his eyes. This isn't just a prayer. This is a statement, a declaration, a historic moment that will be remembered for generations. And the question is, why now? Why here? And most importantly, what does this mean for the world moving forward? Because what happened that night wasn't just an event, it was a message. And once you hear the truth, you will never look at things the same way again. The night sky over New York City is usually filled with the sounds of honking taxis, flashing billboards, and the constant hum of a city that never sleeps. But on this night, something different happened. Thousands of Muslims gathered in the heart of the city, their mats spread across the pavement, their heads bowed in unison, and the soft rhythmic recitation of the Quran filling the air. This was Tawheed prayer, a sacred act of devotion in the month of Ramadan. And for the first time, it was being performed so publicly, so boldly, right in the middle of one of the most powerful cities in the world. The sight was unlike anything most New Yorkers had ever seen. For a city known for its diversity, for welcoming people of all backgrounds, faiths, and beliefs, this was still a moment that stood out Muslims shoulder to shoulder, filling the streets worshiping with a peace and humility that contrasted sharply with the usual chaos of urban life. The sheer number of people, the unity in prayer, and the serenity of the moment created a scene that made even passers-by stop and take notice. For many, it was a moment of pride, a sign of how far religious freedom had come in a nation that claimed to uphold it. For others, it was a moment of reflection, an opportunity to witness a faith that is often misunderstood. The Quranic verses being recited, it spoke of mercy, of patience, of the fleeting nature of this world. And for those who stood on the sidelines watching, the message was clear. This was about something deeper than just prayer. It was about identity, resilience, and the power of faith in the face of adversity. New York City, a place that had seen its fair share of challenges, was now witnessing a moment of unity that transcended differences Muslims had faced. Hardships here, from surveillance programs to discrimination, yet on this night they stood tall, practicing their faith openly and proudly. It was a peaceful gathering, no protests, no signs, just faith manifesting itself in its purest form, and the impact was undeniable. Videos of the prayers went viral, discussions erupted across social media, and the event became more than just night of worship, it became a statement. This moment wasn't just about the Muslims who gathered, it was about the city itself, a city that has always been a battleground of ideas, a melting pot of cultures, and a place where history is constantly being written that night. History was made again, and whether people embraced it or resisted it, one thing was certain: New York City had witnessed something unforgettable when news of the terror war prayers in the heart of New York City began to spread. It was met with a variety of reactions. Some saw it as a beautiful display of religious freedom, a testament to the diversity that America prides itself on. Others, however, viewed it with suspicion, discomfort, or even outright hostility. And then there was the reaction that caught the most attention. The response from Donald Trump, a figure known for his controversial stance on Islam throughout his political career. For years, Trump had been at the center of policies and rhetoric that fueled tensions between Muslims and the broader American public, from proposing a Muslim travel ban to making inflammatory statements about Islam. His position on the faith had often been perceived as antagonistic. So when thousands of Muslims took to the streets of New York to openly practice their faith, people naturally turned to see how he would react. Would he condemn it? Would he ignore it? Or would he acknowledge it in a way that surprised everyone. The media and social platforms buzzed with speculation. Supporters and critics alike dissected his past comments, trying to predict his response. Some expected an outright dismissal, a tweet laced with criticism, or a remark meant to stir division. Others believed he might remain silent, knowing that any comment could ignite further controversy. But what actually happened was something far more revealing. His reaction, or the lack of an immediate aggressive response, spoke volumes about the shifting dynamics of faith politics and public perception. The prayers themselves had already sent a powerful message. They weren't a protest, nor were they an act of defiance. They were a pure expression of faith carried out in peace. And when something is done with sincerity, it has a way of breaking through the barriers of misunderstanding. Even those who had once opposed public displays of Islamic faith found themselves confronted with the undeniable reality. This wasn't about politics. It was about devotion. The sheer magnitude of the gathering, the peacefulness of it, and the way it resonated across communities forced a reevaluation for Trump, a man whose political base often thrived on division. This moment put him in an unusual position. If he criticized it, he risked alienating moderates, who saw it as a simple act of worship. If he praised it, he risked contradicting his previous stance. It was a test of how far public sentiment had shifted, and more than that, it was a moment that reflected how faith, when practiced unapologetically, can challenge even the most hardened perspectives. The world was watching, waiting to see if this event would be reduced to another political debate, or if for once it would be acknowledged for what it truly was, a historic moment of faith, unity, and perseverance in the face of division. The moment thousands of Muslims gathered for Tarawih prayers in the heart of New York City, it sent ripples across the world, a sight so profound, so powerful that it could not be ignored. This wasn't just a gathering, it was a statement, one that carried the weight of history, faith, and resilience. It wasn't a protest, nor was it an attempt to challenge anyone. It was an act of devotion, a deep and sincere connection to the Almighty displayed in the open for all to witness. And the sheer magnitude of it changed the conversation. People who had never seen such a public expression of Islam before were now confronted with it in the most undeniable way. Skyscrapers towered above city lights, illuminated the streets, yet in that moment, the only focus was on the thousands bowing in unison, whispering prayers that had been recited for over 1,400 years. It was as if time had frozen, as if the noise of the city had hushed in respect. And in that silence, people saw something they weren't used to seeing, faith in its rawest, most peaceful form. The media couldn't ignore it. Social platforms lit up with images and videos, some capturing the beauty of the gathering, others questioning what it meant for America's cultural landscape. But beyond the political narratives, beyond the attempts to frame it in a way that fit an agenda, there was one simple, undeniable truth. This moment proved that faith cannot be hidden, it cannot be suppressed, nor can it be distorted by fear-mongering. The prayers in the streets of New York were not just an act of worship, they were proof that Islam is here, that it thrives, and that it stands tall, despite all odds. Even those who had once viewed Islam with skepticism found themselves forced to reconsider, seeing thousands of people, young and old, men and women standing shoulder to shoulder, unified in purpose, shattered stereotypes. They were not a faceless group. They were individuals with hopes, struggles, and a deep sense of spirituality that refused to be silenced. And in that moment, they became impossible to ignore. For decades, Islam had been misrepresented, its followers painted as outsiders, its practices misunderstood. But on this night, under the bright lights of one of the most influential cities in the world, the truth stood on full display. No filter, no distortion, just faith in its purest form. And when something that powerful is revealed, It forces even the most resistant minds to pause, to rethink, and to wonder whether they've been looking at the world through the wrong lenses all along. When the sight of thousands of Muslims praying Tarweeh in the street of New York City reached the eyes of the world, it was not just a moment. It was a shift in perception. The city that never sleeps, the global capital of commerce and culture, had paused, even if just for a short while, to witness something deeply spiritual in a place where noise and movement defined the rhythm of life. A different kind of rhythm took over the synchronized bowing and prostrations of worshipers lost in their devotion. And while it was an act of faith for those who participated, for those watching, it became something more. It became a question, a reflection, and for some an awakening. There was a time when such a public display of Islam would have been considered controversial, met with resistance or even hostility. The post-9/11 world had shaped a narrative of fear, misunderstanding, and division, making it difficult for many to see beyond the images that had been fed to them for years. But on this night, all of that faded. The usual noise of suspicion and doubt was drowned out by something undeniable. The peaceful power of faith people who had once held misconceptions were now witnessing something they never expected: Muslims. Not as an idea, not as a political debate, but as human beings, as worshipers, as people seeking the mercy of their Creator. And the same way believers of every faith do, some stood on the sidelines watching in curiosity, while others, perhaps for the first time, saw Muslims as neighbors rather than strangers. The barriers built by media narratives, by years of misunderstanding, began to crack, if only slightly. And in that moment, those who had never truly seen Islam for what it is, pure devotion, submission to the Almighty, a force of peace, had no choice but to acknowledge it. It wasn't an argument, it wasn't a debate, it was simply the truth, laid out in the open, undeniable, unmistakable. For those who had spent years trying to distort the image of Islam, this was a challenge they hadn't anticipated. No amount of headlines or rhetoric could twist what was right in front of their eyes. The peaceful gathering, the unity, the undeniable sincerity, none of it fit the narratives that had been carefully crafted for so long. And for the first time, the truth was no longer something that had to be argued for. It was something that simply had to be witnessed. And in that witnessing, minds began to change, walls began to crumble, and the reality of Islam, its strength, its beauty, its resilience, stood firm in the heart of a city that once seemed too distant to embrace it. As the images of thousands of Muslims praying TWI in the streets of New York City spread across social media, television, and news platforms, the reaction was swift and widespread. For some, it was a moment of awe and inspiration, a powerful demonstration of faith in the heart of one of the world's most influential cities. For others, it was a shock and unexpected display of unity, resilience that challenged deeply ingrained misconception. But for those who had long opposed Islam, this moment was more than just a prayer. Gathering it was a statement, a reality they could no longer ignore. Over the years, countless efforts have been made to push Islam into the shadows, to keep Muslims hidden behind stereotypes and narratives that distort the truth. From political leaders to media organizations, from historians to commentators, many have worked tirelessly to ensure that Islam remains misunderstood, feared, and alienated. But in one night, in one city, everything changed. The sheer presence of thousands of worshipers standing shoulder to shoulder, bowing in unison, praying in peace, sent a message that could not be silenced. It was not just an act of worship. It was a declaration that Islam is here, that Muslims belong, and that no force on earth can erase the truth of this. Faith Trump's reaction to this historic gathering carried weight because of what he represents. A figure who has often been associated with policies and rhetoric that marginalized Muslims. His response, whether supportive, dismissive, or critical was secondary to the larger reality that had already unfolded. No politician, no policy, no fear-driven narrative could undo what had been seen. The streets of New York bore witness to a faith that has endured centuries of resistance, oppression, and misrepresentation. This was not just about one leader's reaction, it was about the undeniable presence of Islam in a place where its existence had long been challenged. What made this moment even more significant was that it was not orchestrated for political gain, not staged for media attention. It was sincere devotion, a group of believers turning to their Creator in the holiest of months, and that sincerity, that purity had a power stronger than any headline, stronger than any speech, stronger than any attempt to suppress it. The more some tried to fight against Islam, the stronger it became. The more they tried to silence it, the louder its truth resonated. What happened in the streets of New York City was more than just a prayer. It was a testament to the unshakable, unstoppable force of faith. The events of that night in New York City were not just a moment in time. They were a turning point in a much larger narrative. For years, the presence of Islam in the West has been a topic of debate, discussion, and in many cases, deliberate misinformation. The portrayal of Muslims in media has often been distorted, painting a picture that fuels misunderstanding and fear. But what happened that night was something that no amount of media control, political rhetoric, or negative narratives could undo. It was a moment of undeniable truth, a raw and unfiltered expression of faith that stood stronger than any attempt to suppress it. Thousands of worshipers filling the streets in peace, standing in unity, bowing in devotion. This was not an act of defiance, not a protest, not a political statement. It was simply a gathering of believers, fulfilling their religious duty, seeking closeness to their Creator. And yet its impact was far greater than anyone could have anticipated. The world watched, and in that moment, perceptions began to shift. Those who had never encountered Islam beyond what they saw in movies or read in biased articles suddenly saw something real, something authentic, something deeply human. They saw families praying together, young and old standing side by side, voices rising in unison in supplication. It was a vision of Islam that had been hidden from them for far too long. Trump's reaction, no matter what it may have been, was just another piece of a puzzle that had already started to form. Whether he acknowledged it, ignored it, or tried to spin it in a different direction, the reality remained unchanged. Islam was no longer something distant, something foreign, something confined to the margins. It was here. It was visible and it was thriving. The sheer scale of the gathering, the overwhelming sense of peace that radiated from it, and the respected, commanded even from those who did not share the faith, spoke louder than any speech or headline. What happened in New York was not just a one-time event. It was a sign of what is to come. Islam is not fading, it is not weakening, and it is not something that can be erased from the fabric of society. If anything, it is growing, gaining strength, and reclaiming the space that has long been denied to it. The prayers on the streets of New York City were a reminder that truth, no matter how much it is suppressed, will always rise, and no matter how many try to distort it, the reality of Islam will continue to shine, untouched, unshaken, undeniable. The events in New York that night were more than just a gathering. They were a declaration of faith, a testament to resilience, and a reminder that truth cannot be hidden no matter how much the world tries to frame a different narrative. The essence of Islam remains unshaken that night. The streets became a place of worship, echoing with voices of devotion, proving that faith is not confined to walls, but lives in the hearts of believers. It was a moment that could not be ignored, one that stood as a symbol of unity, strength, and the undeniable presence of Islam in the world today. This was not about politics, not about opinions, not about division. It was about faith, standing tall in the face of everything. Whether one accepts it or not, the truth has a way of revealing itself, and that night, the truth was on full display. The peace, the discipline, the sheer power of collective worship sent a message louder than words ever could. It was a reminder to those who try to erase or diminish Islam that no force in this world can silence what is divinely ordained to everyone who stands for truth, for justice, for faith. May you always find strength in your beliefs. Keep walking the path with conviction, because the world may not always understand, but the truth will always prevail. Keep striving, keep believing, and never forget the light of faith shines brightest when the world tries to dim it. Thank you. And may you be blessed with wisdom, guidance, and endless opportunities to make a difference